Hello and welcome to. Hang on, let me get the banner. There we go. The second episode of RAW Sports Quaran-Stream. I am your head of sport, Josh Sim. Yes, we're back for a second episode. The bookshelf's back, and the panel of guests are also back. We've got a slightly different cast, but should be fun. We're going to be chatting to start off with the NFL draft that is still happening as we speak, actually. The majority of it is done, but there's still a few picks to go. We're also going to talk about Gronk because, of course, we are. And then a little bit afterwards, a bit of football news, and then we've got some fun stuff. Top 5, what if, all back for round 2. So yeah, let's introduce the first guest, an ever-present in the RAW Sport team, deputy. It's Joe Spagnoli. Hello.
Hello. How you doing, Josh?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all good. An afternoon of sport. Just done a podcast with Luke Edwards. He'll be coming on later. So yeah, busy afternoon. Looking forward to it though.
And my opening question to you is: obviously we have our chief making his debut on a RAW Sport show. We know he plays American football, but none of us have discerned what position. So would you like to hazard a guess?
Yeah, I've really struggled with this. I was the one that initially opened this query as to what position Jack South plays at the Warwick Wolverines. I've decided to, because I probably really don't know the builds for each of these positions, I've gone safety. I can see him somewhere in the secondary, either corner or safety, but I'm going to go for, if you had to push me, free safety.
Okay. And we'll talk more with you in a bit. We're just going to bring you out and introduce our next, one of our former head of sports, who has been prolific on the NFL draft scene. He's got a podcast. He's made mock drafts. Let's bring him in. Ed Farah. Hello.
Hello, Josh. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I've stayed up to watch every single pick. So my sleeping pattern is absolutely ruined. Bengals, my team, had a really good night last night, so I'm pretty happy.
And we'll talk more about that. Obviously, you would have had the least interaction with Jack South, but you did see how tall he was just now, just before we came on.
So
was that enough to give you a guess?
I was thinking linebacker all the way.
Okay.
Linebacker all the way, but then I saw how tall he was, and
right.
I just think he's slightly wasted as a linebacker. Maybe I think his size might mean he's not getting sideline to sideline quick enough. So it's our defensive end. I considered that, but I reckon with the height, the kind of wiry build, but not he's lanky, but he's got a bit of muscle. So I'm going to go with tight end.
Okay, so Joe went for safety, and you've gone for tight end. Thanks, Ed. We'll find out the result in a sec. Let's bring in next our resident Chicago Bears fan and former station manager, who's still undecided. Well, no, I think he's now got a firmer opinion on whether Mitch Trubisky should still have the starting job or not. It's Connor Boyle.
Hello.
Hello. Now you've heard Joe's gone for safety. Ed's guessed tight end. What do you think Jack South plays for the Warwick Wolverines?
I'm not going to break down his attributes to the same degree that Ed just did.
Right.
But I would say that Ed is on the right kind of track with tight end. I would say going by his height, I think he's a little bit too tall to play possibly in the secondary. I think you have to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more agile. So I think tight end is a good one. I would go tight end or inside linebacker. Screw it. I'll change it. So I'm going to say inside linebacker.
Inside linebacker. Okay. Right. We'll see. We'll soon find out if you're right or not. Let's bring in the chief himself, Jack South. It's the first time in a RAW Sports show, which is super exciting.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Now you've heard the guesses, and I've not had a chance to see your reaction.
Well, there's some interesting guesses. I'd like to first say 2 of you said that I play for the Wolverines. I actually play for the Wolves.
Oh no,
that's a different team.
Oh no.
I want to hear what you have to say, Josh. Where do you think I play?
Oh goodness, you're asking the person who's got the least amount of NFL knowledge. I'm gonna guess defensive end. I don't really know why. I don't really have any logic behind it, but I'm gonna guess that. But would you like to reveal what position you
I
play?
actually do play defensive end, so you got it right, Josh.
Oh, wow.
And no one else did. Congrats.
Oh wow. Let's bring in everyone else who's kind of. I mean, reaction. Was defensive end a factor in any of your thoughts?
I was closer than those two.
Yeah, I that was my original thought, but the height kind of spurred me away.
Well, that was a little fun intro, and of course, throughout the stream, you guys can send in your questions and comment along throughout the various segments. And well, I don't know, because we do upload these to Mixcloud. So if you don't have time to watch the stream, you can either listen to it or obviously catch up on the stream as well on the YouTube channel. So let's get into the first and the big topic, the 2020 NFL. I say post-draft. That's a slightly misleading. It's still happening, but the exciting bit has kind of been wrapped up, you could say. Obviously, let me get to my notes. Joe Burrow, who was the consensus #1 pick in all the mock drafts I think I saw, from Louisiana State Uni. He was the unanimous Heisman Trophy winner, which is, for those who don't know, it's the best player in the college. And in fact, I think now it's 3 years in a row the Heisman Trophy's been the #1 pick, so it's a very good indicator of deciding. He's going to the Cincinnati Bengals, who only won twice last year, as Ed will probably know. And their head coach, Zach Taylor, he is in his second season. He made his debut head coaching season last year. The other player, I guess it's fair to say that everyone knew was going to be picked #2 is Chase Young, from Ohio State, a defensive end like Jack is. He won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy. I think I said that right. For being the defensive player of the year, really, in the college game. And he's going to the Washington Redskins, who won 3 games, and they have a new coach called Ron Rivera. And then I will put up the rest of the picks down there. The stream only let me only had space for the top 6, but there were plenty more talking points. Let's start with Jack. We'll come to you first. I mean, okay. Joe Burrow was pretty much it was a pretty much easy choice, really. Like, it was the choice that everyone expected, and sure enough, the Bengals took him.
I don't think it's a difficult decision at all for the Bengals. Joe Burrow is quite clearly the most talented passer available in this draft class. And mark my words, the days of Andy Dalton are done. You've seen his last snap as a starter. Joe Burrow all the way.
Oh my goodness. Andy Dalton, who is still looking for a new team at the moment. It's tough times for him. Ed, as the Bengals fan, are you optimistic with Burrow's addition? Are you optimistic for the future? Obviously, you can't really, there's not a whole lot you need to do to beat last season's results. But how optimistic are you?
I'm very optimistic, surprisingly so. I mean, the Bengals for a long time have been. I think people are a bit harsh on the Bengals. We reached the playoffs 5 years in a row under Andy Dalton at one point. And we haven't been great, but we spent a lot in free agency. We've still got our first-round pick from last year to come back into the offensive line. We've just brought in T. Higgins, the wide receiver for Burrow to throw to. AJ Green's coming back, who's injured all last year. I mean, Joe Burrow has some weapons. AJ Green, Auden Tate, John Ross, T. Higgins now. So I'm pretty confident. I mean, Joe Burrow is just absolutely the guy. Greatest college season of all time, winning the national championship. Such an easy choice. He's an Ohio kid. Supported the Bengals. His girlfriend lives in Cincinnati. All of it just made perfect sense. It's the perfect storm, really. And I personally think Tua Tagovailoa is probably the slightly more talented quarterback. Obviously, the injuries pushed him out of that conversation. Even if he wasn't injured, I'd still take Burrow just for the hometown spirit, the leadership, the confidence he'll bring. I think he's the all-round package, and I reckon we'll win 7 games next year. I'm that confident, and I think we could be a playoff team by 2022.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tua there, Joe. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation about Tua's injury history. there were reports about how, Miami rushed doctors to try get an examination of him before the pandemic. But in terms of talent, he's clearly up in the high end of the draft, and at pick number 5, it made a lot of sense for the Dolphins to just take him, obviously work on his fitness and teach him the plays and slowly get him up and running as a bona fide NFL quarterback.
Yeah, and it might actually suit Tua Tagovailoa a little bit more to have the beginning of next season delayed if we're assuming this pandemic continues, let him get over these injuries that have ultimately plagued his final year at college. This was a guy who really could have won the Heisman Trophy if he'd had the whole season available to him. As in terms of the quarterbacks in this draft, I think it was pretty clear that he was the number 2 pick. The drop-off between, if you're looking down the quarterback list, the drop-off between him picked at number 5 and Justin Herbert picked at number 6 is absolutely massive. I don't think there was any question that Miami were going to go for Tagovailoa in the end. Going into next season, whether or not he starts from the beginning is ultimately not crucial because they've already got Ryan Fitzpatrick. They may hold on to Josh Rosen for another year, although to be honest, I think he will move on to another team as a backup. It's looking good for Miami. They did have an unbelievably bad year, but let's not forget they've also got about 6,000 picks in this draft as well, many of which are still to come. So this will be a very different Miami Dolphins team coming into next year. As for Joe Burrow, I mean, whether or not he's the best player in the draft, I think is ultimately up for other people to decide. I personally would have given that to Chase Young, but winning the national championship, another Heisman Trophy winner getting it, great pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. 7 wins, I'm not entirely sure. I certainly don't think they're going to win that division, but I can actually see them finishing ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers next year, which may sound crazy, but I can actually see that happening.
Yeah, and obviously we've got the top 6 here, and I do want to get onto the Chargers pick of Justin Herbert in a bit. But Connor, do you reckon every team in this top 6 here kind of picked to what they needed? Did they get everything that, the main kind of areas that they need to address? Were they kind of addressed in these early picks, do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, this was actually, a lot of people often say, like, draft analysts, they don't get it right. They don't know what they're talking about, but pretty much everyone was sure that these moves would be made in the first 6. They've all picked up where they absolutely need. Like, just for example, the Lions with Jeff Okudah, they desperately needed a cornerback. The Redskins desperately needed a defensive end playmaker, a good pass rusher. Obviously, Dolphins, Chargers, Bengals all have issues at quarterback, need to bring in some young prospects to try and better themselves. There's absolutely no shockers in this first 6. There actually weren't that many in the entire first round. I mean, it was pretty run of the mill with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions.
And we'll get on to one of those exceptions that's kind of been the main talking point, really. Ed, obviously you did a mock draft. So in terms of the first 10 or so picks, were they ones that you kind of foresaw?
I got 6 of the first 7 picks right, apart from the Giants taking Andrew Thomas and the Dolphins not trading up to 3. I mean, I was really shocked the Giants took Andrew Thomas. He's the 4th best defensive tackle in this draft for me. I was surprised if they were going to take him. They didn't trade down, but I think it's pretty predictable what was going to happen. All of these teams needed exactly the position they had, and apart from the Chargers, they've all made good picks, I think.
Do you want to elaborate further on the Justin Herbert pick and your thoughts on it?
I have Justin Herbert as my 6th favorite quarterback in this draft. I don't like him. I think he's got the curse of being 6'6", good looking and intelligent. I think he's a good quarterback, but his mechanics are all over the place. His footwork is dreadful. His decision making is just bewildering at times. I can't believe the Chargers have taken him. I can't believe they've taken him. I get why there's a bit of hype. And if you had him for 2 or 3 years and you said, I'm just going to break down all your mechanics, break down all your footwork, we're going to start again, maybe you could make something out of him. But I don't get, when Cam Newton's on the market, why a team who need to sell out stadiums have gone for a guy who I don't think will have any success in this league. He seems like a nice guy. I really do hope he does well. But just watching his tape, there are so many red flags that I would not justify picking him in the first 2 rounds. Maybe in day 3.
I mean, that raises kind of an interesting question, really. Did the Chargers, did they need to get a new shiny young quarterback, or could they have picked someone on the market, someone like a Jameis Winston or Cam Newton, or even an Andy Dalton? People who have been there, experienced, obviously. Did they need to get a high draft pick to pick a quarterback, as opposed to kind of all the other areas that they need to address? Jack South, do you reckon that the Chargers, because of obviously it's the LA market as well, they have stadiums to fill, obviously, the Rams have had such big success, and it's kind of like, I see in the NBA, it's a bit like Lakers, Clippers, you kind of have to have, there's a little rival and you kind of need to one up the other one. Do you reckon that the Chargers were better off picking an established name compared to Justin Herbert and picking them up off the free agency market, rather?
Yeah, I don't think that Justin Herbert is necessarily the wrong call for the Chargers. I think maybe the right call would have been to try and trade for a higher pick and try and pick up Tagovailoa before the Dolphins could have done. But given that they had the option, I actually think Justin Herbert would do all right. I reckon they can play him not as a starter in the first year, get him to sort of learn the league and improve on all the things that he's doing wrong. But what's going to happen is Tyrod Taylor's going to stay out on the field, and eventually he's going to start micromanaging the game like he always does. And the crowd's going to start calling for Herbert to come on. And at that point, you need him there. And I think he's the right choice.
Yeah. Another QB pick that kind of raised a lot of eyebrows was Green Bay Packers picking up Jordan Love. They traded up to pick up Jordan Love, in fact. Joe, obviously Aaron Rodgers is still on the team. He's 36, but he's still up in that, well, maybe not top tier, but like second highest tier. He's still up there. Can you explain? Do you have any reasoning behind the Packers taking Jordan Love?
I really don't. We've seen the reactions of an awful lot of Packers fans over on YouTube. Ty, who was on the Pat McAfee show, reacted virally and violently to the Packers drafting Jordan Love at 26th. Tom Grossi's another guy I've been following, a diehard Packers fan. He was absolutely incensed about this as well. The Packers got to the NFC Championship game. They gave up 186 yards before any contact in that game. That is unforgivable for what is effectively the NFL semi-final. They desperately needed at least one wide receiver in this draft. There was, the draft class for first-round wide receivers was good, and there were a few options still available. They've got at least 3 years, really, of Aaron Rodgers left. If you need a backup behind him, there's plenty of quarterbacks available on free agency, asking for so much less than what Jameis Winston and Cam Newton are. I mean, even Andy Dalton would probably be asking for too much, but needless to say, the options are out there for the Green Bay Packers if they want to do it. This idea that he's going to replicate Brett Favre, sit behind the starting quarterback for a few years and then turn into one of the best in the league, I really don't see it happening. There will definitely be quarterbacks in the late first round better than Jordan Love available next year. They really could have waited that long. Ultimately, we've had 3 rounds of the NFL draft so far, I believe, and all of us were betting that the Packers would pick at least one linebacker and at least one wide receiver. As it stands, they have not picked, I believe, either of those positions up, and no one can make sense of it. The Jordan Love thing is ridiculous, but as the draft goes on and on, it just seems like the Packers are picking more and more counterproductively for a team that should be winning Super Bowls, or at least trying to win Super Bowls right now, rather than building for the future.
Yeah, I was going to say, it became even worse. At about 4 a.m. last night, I think it really hit how bad a decision it was, because the Packers were picking at 94, and Jacob Eason, the Washington quarterback, fell all the way there. And Jacob Eason's more prototypical kind of Aaron Rodgers, gunslinger type quarterback, loads of upside, might have been a round 1 pick if he'd have stayed in college another year. And I'm just thinking, well, you could take a wide receiver in round 1, get a good one there, then you get a linebacker needed, maybe a Malik Harrison type, and then in round 3 you get the guy to stay behind Rodgers for 3-4 years. You're only wasting and then that way you get the talent around Rodgers and you still build for the future. So you could find something there for Jordan Love, but when Jacob Eason was there in the 3rd round, when you had a guy that could become a franchise quarterback there at 94, that's what really hit me. So I think that really hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like completely fair to put that analysis out. Like, Jacob Eason Where were you? Where did you have him dropping? Because I had him going sort of mid-second, if I had to project.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Colts might take a punt on him to work behind Philip Rivers. They didn't in the end, which I think was fair enough. I had a mid-second round grade. I think if he'd have spent another year in college, I'd have had him as a late first-round pick. He only really got one season in college because he got injured at Georgia. Jake Fromm took over him. He had to redshirt for eligibility reasons, but he first went over to Washington. I think he's an Aaron Rodgers kind of clone. He's a gunslinger. He's got a massive arm, loads of talent. He reads the game really well. He just didn't have a time in college to show that productivity. So the fact he slipped into the 4th round is astounding, utterly astounding. I don't know how nobody took a punt on him in the 3rd round. I'm surprised the Raiders didn't have a go at him when he was there, because he's a kind of quarterback they love. So the fact he was at 94 and the Packers could have got him and then got all the talent before that and not pissed off a future Hall of Fame quarterback, that's what really gets me. I like Jordan Love, don't get me wrong, but Jacob Eason has got the same amount of upside, in my opinion. He fits into their system better. And he was there at 94. So that's that back for me.
Yeah, I also think if you look at Jordan Love, like he has impressive numbers. Like he's had back-to-back 3,000-yard seasons. He was the MVP in the Mexico, what was it? The Mexico Dust Pro Bowl, something like that. But he comes from Utah State. It's not a very competitive division, the Mountain West Conference. It's not competitive. And so putting up those kind of numbers, and also his 2018 season was his best by far, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in 13 games. In 2019, he slipped down. He had 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions in 13 games. I'm not sold on him. I think he is a quarterback that you would pick up as a gamble in round 3 or 4. Quite honestly.
I don't necessarily think this is the worst decision here, right? Like, obviously, it's not a great decision, and I think a lot of the reactions to this are justified, but I reckon that Aaron Rodgers is probably the best quarterback mentor you could ever ask for in the NFL. And you're just going to have Jordan Love sit on the bench for a season, 2 seasons, maybe even 3 seasons, and just have Aaron Rodgers teach him the absolute classics of the game, and then when he gets on the field, he'll be perfect.
But what are you worried about? Like, Aaron Rodgers, last season, the first game with the Bears, he got injured.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that Jordan Love is able to play if Aaron Rodgers gets injured.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I say about Jordan Love is the last time a quarterback got drafted out of Utah State was 1980, and that was in the 7th round of the draft, I think.
Drafted at all.
Yeah, a quarterback drafted at all. I mean, to be fair, 2018 to 2019, they lost their offensive coordinator. They lost all their good players. They left. So I kind of understand why he wasn't as good. But I do like Jordan Love. I just feel when there was quarterback talent falling in the draft, it might not have been the best idea. And now the whole narrative about Green Bay is that they're not valuing Aaron Rodgers. There are teams who are after a quarterback. I tell you what, if Justin Herbert doesn't work out, Aaron Rodgers is really, really angry with this whole situation. Would not put it past the Chargers to make a move for him. If he wanted to leave, he would not put it past him because he seemed like he'd fit. He never seemed to fit in Green Bay. He'd work in Los Angeles. So it's just a weird position to put Aaron Rodgers in. It's a weird position to put Jordan Love in because now the fan base is divided. And if you pick up a guy in round 3, everyone's like, oh, yeah, you're building for the future. But now it's, well, this guy's the future of the franchise. It has to work. And you've annoyed the guy who's been your quarterback forever. It may pay off. It's a huge gamble. It may pay off in 5-6 years. Jordan Love's MVP. We're all laughing about it, but it's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
And the fact that they traded up to get him as well, which makes you think that they had conviction for the pick. If they picked him at 29, I don't think this would have been getting the attention it's gotten, considering that they've moved up 3 positions in the draft to get him. Josh isn't here, so I'll just take over this for a second. Connor and Jack, if you've got anything else to say about Jordan Love, that's absolutely fine. Are there any other first-round picks or second-round picks, guys, that you look at and just wonder what the hell they were going on, why the hell they made that decision? I mean, the one that confused me, 19th overall, the Las Vegas Raiders picking up Damon Arnett, the corner from the Ohio State Buckeyes. Third corner to go in the draft. A lot of people had him ranked 8th, 9th best corner. Some people even had him outside the top 10. Just what was going on there, do you think?
I couldn't tell you what was going on there. That seems like a completely oddball choice. They could have, like you say, they could have picked any of the cornerbacks who had been rated above him in the draft. I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they're bad picks.
I think really what happened there is they had with the Clemson cornerback. I think went to the Atlanta Falcons. His name escaped me.
AJ Terrell.
AJ Terrell. If AJ Terrell was there, he'd have been their guy because the Raiders have a certain player they like. They like big, physical, fast. AJ Terrell would have been their guy. And I think AJ Terrell went, and they were like, well, wasn't expecting him to go because AJ Terrell for me was an early second-round talent. I was surprised the Falcons went for him. And that meant the Raiders were like, well, who's our next guy on the board? Who's the guy that we'd consider taking next? And I don't think they planned for the whole AJ Terrell thing to happen. Damon Arnett's got a bit of talent, but he's 24. He's overshadowed at Ohio State by loads of better defensive players. You had Okudah, Chase Young, Bosa's were there at the same time. So, I mean, he's got talent. It was weird for him to go in the first round. And there were loads of quarterbacks there. Stephon Diggs, his brother, Trevon Diggs. I'm not going to butcher the surname, but the guy that the Miami Dolphins took at 30. Christian Fulton from LSU. Christian Fulton would have been a decent pick for the Raiders. I think he fits the mold just as well. So that was a weird one for me.
Jalen Reagor confused me for the Eagles. I was surprised that he was picked ahead of particularly Justin Jefferson, who was still there in the draft. And, who else was it? It was...
Brandon Ayuk?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. Jalen Reagor, he put up decent numbers at Texas Christian. But I think particularly Justin Jefferson, I'm surprised Justin Jefferson slipped that far down. If you're the Eagles, he's a bona fide starter. I don't know why you would pick Reagor, who's possibly more of a depth player.
Yeah, I think it must have been positional because I think the Eagles would have wanted either Ruggs or CeeDee Lamb. I think they must have gone for Reagor because they need a deep threat. They need someone absolutely rapid to go and give Carson Wentz someone to throw to downfield. And that must have been their thinking, is that we need someone really quick. And Justin Jefferson's more of a slot receiver. He's really good, but he won't give us that electric downfield threat, which is, I guess, the reasoning behind going for Reagor. I still would have preferred Ayuk, Mims, someone like that to the Eagles, and then maybe you try and get a rapid receiver in round 2 or 3. It was a weird one for me as well. I'm just trying to work out the reasoning.
Were we? Sorry, guys. I had some technical issues. I'm back now. Were we surprised with Jalen Hurts going to the Philadelphia Eagles by any chance? Because that seemed like, I mean, they've got a quarterback in Carson Wentz, so obviously he's going to be backing him up. Was it a surprise that they didn't use the pick on someone else that could make a quick impact or an early impact for the team?
He's kind of a luxury pick, isn't he? Really, Jalen Hurts. He's not a quarterback in the mold of anyone else in the draft. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's a guy who you can throw in for the run pass option. And I think they've seen Taysom Hill at the Saints have loads of success as that guy they just throw in when they need something to happen. And I guess they were kind of enamored by that, especially having a guy who they can build a certain type of offense around to throw people off, especially when Carson Wentz is a bit injury prone. When you need to take him out of the game for 2 or 3 minutes for a knock just to make sure he works, you can have a new threat to throw at people. So I kind of got it. I mean, I thought Jalen Hurts might have been a push there, but I see the logic that they're taking it. And now you've got Reagor as well. Those two make something really happen. So it's a little bit confusing, but I see why they did it.
So, okay, this might be... There'll be multiple answers, I feel like, for this next question. But in terms of what we've seen so far, which team do you reckon has done the best job in addressing their weaknesses? Maybe, are setting themselves up for a much improved season. Are there any standout teams that have made the right calls to address their own needs? I'll start with Ed. Seemingly, as you've done the mock draft, yeah, just give us a team that you reckon has done really well in this draft.
Arizona Cardinals, hands down, have had the best draft. Everyone thought they took an offensive tackle. They go at 48 sacks last year, and they had Kyler Murray, really maneuverable quarterback. And the fact he was sacked 48 times, three times a game is ridiculous and unforgivable. You need to protect your franchise quarterback. So when they didn't take an offensive tackle in the first round, even though it was Isaiah Simmons, who's my favourite non-quarterback in this draft, I think he's phenomenal. It was a bit of a worry. But then look the way it felt. Josh Jones, who was in my eyes a late first rounder, second round talent, he was statistically, he was an unbelievable offensive tackler. The likes of the coaches in the NFL didn't seem to like him. The fact he fell to them in the round 3, meaning they have Isaiah Simmons, the best defensive playmaker in the draft, in my mind. They got DeAndre Hopkins with their second round pick, basically. And then they've got an offensive tackle in Josh Jones with loads of upside, who should be a straightaway starter in the third round. That is an absolute coup. The Cardinals will be walking away thinking, how the hell did that happen? How the hell did Isaiah Simmons fall to us? How the hell did we convince the Texans to give us DeAndre Hopkins? How did Josh Jones fall there? They will be delighted. Easily the best. I mean, some teams had a good night. The Cardinals had an insane night.
Joe, have you got another team other than Cardinals? Or do you agree with Ed that the Cardinals kind of did the best job so far?
They were the first team that came to mind for me. Another team that I'd mention as maybe towards like the upper rungs of success in the draft so far, despite the fact we've already mentioned that their choice of offensive tackle at 4th overall was questionable. I think the New York Giants have shaped themselves up pretty well in this offseason. Of course, signing Blake Martinez at linebacker is very questionable, especially after the shocker he had for Green Bay in the championship game. If that works out, and choosing to sign him rather than getting Isaiah Simmons might be a good decision. In the end, of course, they get Andrew Thomas at 4th overall, who they believe is the best offensive tackle in the draft. I'd have gone for Mekhi Becton over him, but the really good pick from them was the pick in the second round, 36th overall, Xavier McKinney, the first safety to go in the draft. I think Ed and I both had him going somewhere around 18th overall in the first. For him to have dropped to a team that already have one amazing safety in Jabril Peppers, all of a sudden, this New York Giants team looks a lot more filled out than it was last year. Granted, they had a shocking season, but with the Redskins still having an awful lot of work to do, the Cowboys being questionable, they could be on for a pretty good season. Not Super Bowl contending by any means, but they've had a good draft so far, I think.
The Giants, obviously, last year with the Daniel Jones pick, that was the kind of the pick that was like similar to the Jordan Love pick in terms of scrutiny and reaction. Jack, you're a Seahawks fan. We haven't addressed this yet.
I am a Seahawks fan. I would prefer not to address what the Seahawks have done in this particular draft. I don't think
Were you surprised with the first pick? I can't remember his name for the life of me, but from all accounts, it seemed like a very left field pick that they made.
I feel like the Seahawks didn't do what they needed to do going into this draft, and I've said it, I think, 3 or 4 drafts in a row, that the Seahawks need to solidify an offensive line, and they're just proceeding not to do that. So, I don't know.
And Connor, we touched upon the Chicago Bears, your Chicago Bears passion and support. Happy with what they've come up with, what they've got?
Honestly, when I spoke to you guys about it last night, I was hot. I was angry. But I've taken a little breath. I've looked at the tapes for Cole Kmet, and I'm actually pretty happy. But I think the issue with Bears fans is that we just get used to not playing with a tight end, with a good tight end. So we forget that position needs fixing. And like, I'm guilty of that as well. I think Cole Kmet, he's the number 1 tight end pick coming out of this. He was great at Notre Dame. He was very, very good, very physical presence. There's no pressure for him to come out and start straight away because obviously we have Jimmy Graham. So maybe he'll start a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of tight end depth. I think Pace is just planning on throwing in a couple sticks and having the tight end fight each other to the death to figure out which 4 should be on the roster. because we have 10 now. But I think Colkmet was a great. I think Jalen Johnson was actually a really good addition. And number 50 pick. Like, if it weren't for his shoulder injuries, he would have gone a lot higher. I mean, this guy, I saw a really good stat about him, which was, if you bear with me, he only gave up 4 receptions over 10 yards all season. That was with 31 targets. He's a bully. He is brilliant in man-on-man coverage. He can do zone coverage as well. I can see him starting next to Kyle Fuller at the cornerback position, quite frankly. So I've had a little bit of time to think about the picks. Like, obviously, we didn't quite address the issues that we've had at wide receiver. We haven't really filled the kind of gap that we now have at safety with the loss of Clinton Dix. But I'm pretty happy overall, and hopefully we can pick up some good depth players for our O-line later in the rounds. But yeah, I'm pretty happy actually.
Josh has conveniently disappeared, so I think I'll segue into the next topic of discussion. Of course, a big trade, technically not a free agent acquisition over the last few days. The next player to fall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Rob Gronkowski. Thank you, Josh. Arguably one of the greatest tight ends in the history of the game. Made the NFL All 100 list that was made a couple of years ago. Josh, do you want to finish this question?
No, I mean, you covered it well. For those who don't know, he's a Rob Gronkowski retired for 1 year tight end. He was traded with a 7th-round pick for a 4th-round pick that went to the Patriots. Obviously reunites him with Tom Brady, his former teammate, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 4-time first-team All-Pro. And if people are wondering what he's been doing since he's retired, he's been pursuing some acting jobs. He's the current WWE 24/7 champion. I love the memes that, the first person to tackle him in this NFL season will be technically the champion. It was a huge shock, wasn't it, Joe, when we saw the news that he had unretired himself and then decided he wanted a piece of the action in Tampa Bay.
Well, the last few seasons where he was at the New England Patriots, it became pretty clear that he was never going to play for a quarterback that wasn't Tom Brady, but I don't think we were expecting him to make this decision quite so quickly. I also think we've been piling on the pain on Belichick all summer. The fact that all that the New England Patriots get back for Rob Gronkowski is a 4th-round pick and giving away a 7th as well. On the face of it, I mean, it's possible that Rob Gronkowski was holding them to ransom. Of course, he would be on a ridiculous contract, which you wouldn't ordinarily pay for a tight end. Well, certainly not one that's not going to play for you all season. So maybe that's just the very best that they could get out of Tampa Bay. But all of a sudden, you look at that Tampa Bay offensive options. You got Tom Brady throwing to one of the best wide receiver cores in the league, the core that ultimately led the league in passing yards last year with Jameis Winston. You add Rob Gronkowski, one of the greatest at all time, at tight end, who's only 30 years old. They look terrifying. If this team flops, then every NFL analyst in the world needs to eat their words next year, because right now it's looking like a dream roster.
Connor, do you reckon? I mean, because when Tom Brady first moved to Tampa Bay, we was like, okay, maybe they will be a Super Bowl contender. Do we now consider them favorites to make the Super Bowl? Like, where do we put them now with this move?
What I think we need to be careful with is that we don't talk about the Bucs as we did with the Browns last season. Because I think when you have a team which makes a lot of big acquisitions, they have some big game players on offense and defense, people are very quick to say, well, obviously they're going to challenge for playoff. Obviously they're going to make it to the championship game now. And I think the obvious difference is that I think Mike Evans is a better wide receiver than Odell Beckham Jr. I think Brady he's not even in the same category as Baker Mayfield. I think I think this team with Brady is a bit. It's a few seasons ahead of where the Browns want to be. I don't know whether because this is an untested team as well. They haven't all played with each other. I mean, I'll see how things work out. I'll see how the first few games go before we start calling things. I think everyone in the NFL is very quick to want to call who is going to make it. through to the Super Bowl, and I want to see how this Bucks team plays first before I make any kind of wild statement.
Yeah, I mean, granted, we don't even know which version of Rob Gronkowski we're going to get when he comes back because, and Jack, South, maybe you can talk us through it. I mean, he's struggled with injuries towards the latter part of his career. Obviously, he's an all-pro player. Do you reckon we're going to get the best version of Rob Gronkowski? I mean, he's obviously going to have to shape up a bit more, having kind of let himself go a little bit on his like kind of 1 year off. What do we reckon we're going to get out of him production-wise?
I don't think we're going to see the best Rob Gronkowski we've ever seen. I think that's, if anything, not even the previous time he played, that wasn't the best Gronkowski we've ever seen either. But I don't think he'll let himself go too much. I guess playing, or whatever you want to call being in the WWE, you still have to keep some level of fitness up to do that. So he's not going to be completely out of it. He's not going to have just completely derailed. I think he will be able to come back in and be playing, obviously, as a starter under Brady. I think it will be good, but it won't be the best Gronk we've ever seen.
Okay. I'll ask everyone the final kind of question to wrap up this NFL discussion. Let's make some way too early predictions. I feel like that's going to be a fun thing to do for the Super Bowl. So the two teams you think will contest the Super Bowl next year, just way early predictions. Obviously, these will change. But let's start with Ed. Two teams to make the Super Bowl next year. Who would you have, given this current moment?
I'm going to say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be in the Super Bowl next year.
Okay.
It's kind of like just taking it's taking a video game and transferring all the best players to your team. It's just I know Gronkowski, but I think actually the year or two out for Gronk, given all his injury issues and the fact he's been fighting for 2 years, might mean he comes back rejuvenated. So I couldn't predict who's going to be there with them. I think teams like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the 49ers will still be fighting and in and around for there. But I think the Bucks will definitely be in the Super Bowl. I think I have them as my favourites overall. I know it's a big thing, and I know we have no idea if they're gel or not, but it's just going to be so much fun. So I've got the Bucks down, and I think the Chiefs and the Ravens, that will be around there competing as well.
Joe, do you agree with that?
I mean, I don't actually. The thing is, the NFC South is going to be so interesting next year that we can't even guarantee that with Gronkowski coming back, Brady's first year there, we can't even guarantee that the Buccaneers are going to win what will be a very contested division. I've actually gone pretty boring with the teams I'm projecting. For the NFC, I've actually gone for the New Orleans Saints from the same division. Of course, they've got probably the best wide receiver in the league. Of course, being fed by Drew Brees, who's just signed a 2-year contract extension. One of the very few quarterbacks in this league that can hold a candle to Tom Brady. They've disappointed in the last few years. I think this is the year where they'll finally make it to the Super Bowl. However, they will probably be beaten by the team that have about 25 cents worth of cap space at the moment, the reigning Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs. Best quarterback in the league, Patrick Mahomes.
So back-to-back for Super Bowls for the Chiefs. Okay, Connor Boyle. Who do you reckon is going to make the Super Bowl?
I think AFC-wise, I think the Ravens are looking scary. The Ravens are looking scary. Where they lacked last year and where it really showed in their game against the Chiefs, their secondary was not strong enough. Their defense was not strong enough. They let too many passes. They have bolstered up their defense this year. I think they're a shoo-in. Quite honestly, definitely to get to the championship game. And I'd be very surprised if they didn't make it through to the Super Bowl. NFC, a lot more difficult to call. Obviously, the Bears are up there. I'll throw a shot in the dark and say the Vikings. I think the Vikings have made have low-key added quite a few good names onto their roster. I think they've improved their secondary. I think they have they've replaced Stephon Diggs, I think, a wide receiver with Justin Jefferson. I think pair him with Tajay Sharp and Adam Thielen, plus the tight end of Kyle Rudolph and Owen Jones. I think they've got a top 10 offense for sure. I believe Kirk Cousins as well now. I think he proved himself last season. I think he can take them through to a championship game and possibly a Super Bowl.
All right. Jack South, the final word goes to you in terms of which two teams do you reckon will be at the Super Bowl next year?
I feel like we're going to end up combining Ed and Joe's answers a bit here. I reckon the Buccaneers are coming in from the NFC. I think that Brady and Gronk is too powerful on its own, and you could win a Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl at least with just those two players in your squad and 9 empty roster slots. And I reckon they're going to be facing the Chiefs, who will top them, because I think the Chiefs are going to define this era of the NFL. That's an even bolder statement right there. Yeah, Chiefs Bucks, Chiefs win.
Yeah, I have to say Andy Reid is winning the fashion sweepstakes at the moment of the draft. His Hawaiian shirts are amazing. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. Ed, Connor, Jack, thanks for coming on. Joe, we'll come back to you in a bit. I mean, this is the most comprehensive NFL conversation I think we've all had in a bit. And it will be interesting to see how it all shakes out. So thanks, guys, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. And I'm going to take you guys out one by one. Here we go. And right, so thanks guys for persisting with the tech issues that I personally had. We're back now, at least, and after having done this NFL discussion, I think it's only appropriate now we switch to the sports that's still in flux. So we have no idea what's going to happen. In a little quick news roundup. And I'll put the ticker down, and I know I'm going to be the only one who can really talk about it, so I'm going to mention it now while I'm on solo. But big shout out to Sabrina Ionescu, I think is how you pronounce it. Her name. She went first in the women's NBA draft, #1 pick, and is the only college player to have 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 1,000 assists. A phenomenal season. So congratulations to her, and I think. And yeah, again, the NBA, the WNBA, we are still waiting to see how that season shakes out. But I think the second story, turning to the Premier League and Newcastle United. We'll bring in Luke Edwards first, if he's good to go.
Yeah, hello. How's it going?
Good. There's a few tech issues, but we're pushing through it.
No, we'll make do.
I think the biggest story in terms of the Premier League, other than the when will they come back situation, which I think I don't really want to rehash. We kind of addressed it last week. The Newcastle United takeover, potential rumored completion news that might happen. For those who, I'll just quickly give a brief kind of rundown to those who have no idea about what's happening. £300 million is the estimated takeover value. It's being led by Amanda Staveley, financier, who tried to buy Newcastle 2 years ago, and she helped broker the Man City takeover by Sheikh Mansour, so she's not completely new to this. She's brought on the Reuben brothers, which are a pair of British billionaire businessmen, and most controversially, the Saudi Arabia Investment Fund, who would have contribute 80% of the takeover. And we've had the Premier League have been sent letters by both the Qatari broadcaster beIN Sports over concerns of piracy of their broadcasts, and also Amnesty, obviously because of the Saudi Arabia human rights record. And what was your initial reaction, Luke? Because obviously, you know, we've been around for the whole Mike Ashley kind of tenure. We know how unpopular he is, and so the news of this was, I imagine, exciting for Newcastle fans. But having kind of now had a few days to think about it, what's your kind of stance on it now?
It's a weird one. It's a very interesting time for this deal to be going through, because apparently it's not for that much money. I've heard rumours of it being flung around £100 million for this deal to go through, which is not a lot of money for a football club. But it's a very strange time because we don't know exactly what the financial situation of football is going to be like in 6 months. So it could be that this ends up being an absolutely terrible deal for the consortium that's buying the club, and actually a fantastic deal for Mike Ashley. Equally, it could go the other way. We don't really know. What I will say is there's a lot of words going around with Amnesty and human rights issues. In my opinion, we're way past that kind of thing already in football. The moment we saw the likes of Manchester City being bought by big Qatari companies and things like that, that was the moment that I thought, well, we're probably already through the looking glass with regards to having unethical ownership in football. So on that front, if people who are bringing up issues with that, I get it. I think it's absolutely a fair argument. All I would say is it'd be very hard for the Premier League to enforce it, because they've already set a precedent of allowing these kinds of owners into the league and being able to fund, sort of put in absurd amounts of money. You've also got the other flip side of the argument where you've got this consortium that's buying the club, I believe, is worth around £200 billion, which is something like more than 4 times the value of all of the other Premier League owners combined. This is a level of money that we have not seen before in the Premier League. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, because there's rumours of financial fair play regulations having to be relaxed as a result of COVID, clubs becoming insolvent, owners needing to input their own money into the club so that they can actually maintain themselves. It would be, I would wonder if this consortium end up putting in that extra little bit of money and maybe taking advantage of that situation, and then taking Newcastle way past financial fair play regulations and doing some, shall we say, suspect spending. So you've got that side of the argument, and you've also got the human rights issues. What I will say is, for Newcastle fans, this has the potential on a footballing level to be quite an exciting opportunity for them. They've gone through the Ashley years of having just absolutely no financial input into the club whatsoever. Ashley's taken parts of the club's soul away from it, trying to rename St James's Park to Sports Direct Arena and things like that. This guy is an absolute footballing leech. He's destroyed that club, and this is, Newcastle need to be performing at the top level. On a footballing level, this is a big opportunity for them. I'd be very interested to see where they're at in 3 or 4 years' time. I do think it will take time before they're even competing at European level. The top 6 are just that extra bit higher. But very exciting times on a football level for Newcastle, ethical issues aside.
Yeah, let's bring in, I'll just quickly, as we bring in Joe Spagnoli, I'll just quickly say we've been in this situation before, obviously. There's been rumoured, I think Newcastle and Takeover rumours have been around for quite a while. So, I mean, we can't obviously completely approach this with certainty. But Joe, if this was to happen and go through, I mean, you've probably seen lots of fantasy starting lineups Newcastle could roll out with X amount of money. I mean, the list of world-class managers that might somehow rock up on Tyneside. Like Luke said, do you reckon it's a bit of a project, if you like a bit of a 5-year project before Newcastle fans get back to those glory days that they're hoping to get back to?
Well, the first thing I need to say is the idea of some of these drafts, like Kylian Mbappe playing in front and to the left of the 2 Longstaff brothers, is just one of the fantasy football scenarios that I want to see. One of the biggest issues with Newcastle United, I think it's fair to say that Newcastle, in terms of net spend, have been one of the lowest in the Premier League for quite some time. Ashley really not investing into the club at all. It stands to reason with the rocketing investment across the English Premier League that with a little bit more investment, Newcastle's fortunes could be drastically changed around, especially if they have a great manager. I mean, Rafa Benitez arguably bought the club out in the last few years in terms of results. Steve Bruce this season actually hasn't done too badly, despite the insipidly negative way that Newcastle play. They actually, a little bit of a stat for you, Newcastle lead the league in the amount of passes the opposition team makes before you apply pressure. It's 18. That is unbelievably negative in footballing terms. The second lowest team in the league is Sheffield United. They are 5 passes lower than that. So Newcastle need to change drastically in terms of improving their footballing acumen. One of the biggest issues Newcastle have had, though, which a full changeover on the ownership level could improve, is their recruitment. When Newcastle have made big signings, let's talk about Joe Linton last summer, could not have bought a worse player for that system going into this year. Joe Linton, Tifo Football made a fantastic video about this recently. Joe Linton's not a bad footballer at all. He's just been absolutely wasted from minute 1 in that team, completely isolated in a position that he never played at Hoffenheim. So Newcastle need to not just invest, but also invest well, because when they have invested under Mike Ashley, quite often they've been picking up pretty poor players, with the exception of cheaper signings like the likes of Federico Fernandez, who for me hasn't been as impressive as he was back in his Swansea days. Fabian Schär is a better example of a signing that works well for them. I think Newcastle probably will improve on the footballing level coming out of this, moving into the top 10 in the next few years. When you look at how awful the player development and recruitment is for a lot of teams in the Premier League, it is possible they make that jump. On the final point of ethics in football, I completely agree with Luke. We're well beyond that Rubicon in that point. The summer where Barcelona replaced UNICEF on their shirt with Qatar Airways, that's the moment when you know it's not coming back. Yeah, maybe it affects this country a little bit more, but that's just because of how marketable the football is. We've seen this with Man City. We probably will see it with another top 6 club in the next 20 years. Newcastle, in the wake of how bad their ownership's been under Mike Ashley, the fact that this is honestly seen as an improvement is probably a sign of why it's going to happen.
And I mean, there's still a lot for them to sort out. I mean, Matty Longstaff is a free agent this summer. I've read reports that he could be leaving for and Newcastle would only get 400 grand in terms of compensation, which is a hugely, really tiny fee for a 20-year-old who, they would have hoped if they did sell him, they'd hope to make, a huge profit on that. So yeah, I mean, obviously this is all rumored. We can't really go into huge specifics until we know it's probably confirmed. But yeah, I think this is obviously a proceed with caution kind of move in terms of the football. We'll switch it over to, and I didn't think this was going to be a huge news cycle, but then as each day passed, there seems to be something new. And Thursday, we learned that Phil Neville will be parting ways with the Lionesses in July 2021 when his contract is finished, basically, when it expires. I believe the FA, they said in the statement they wanted someone to coach the team for both the delayed Euros, which are now 2022, and the World Cup 2023. And Neville, in a quote, said, "I'm looking forward to getting back to work with the team as soon as possible. We have a fantastic squad of players, and there is plenty to work on as we look to progress as a team going into 2021. And obviously, similar to the time when Neville was appointed, the same candidates have kind of cropped up: Joe Ellis, Emma Hayes, Nick Cushing, Casey Stoney, who's doing well at Manchester United. I'll start with Luke again. Phil Neville had there was high optimism. Like, he seemed to have a good start, and then it kind of hit a point where now, I don't want to say he's become a laughingstock, but like his reputation's taken a hit.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of come in the wake of actually the World Cup exit last year. England got knocked out of the World Cup. I had a very good performance, I thought. Got unlucky against a very, very, very good USA side. But the performances since then just haven't been as good. I believe they got knocked out of the She Believes Cup in one of the early rounds. Not a very good performance from them, considering as well that the She Believes Cup is such a big deal for the England national team and is something that historically they've done very well in. So to have that result is nowhere near good enough. You've also got to consider that Phil Neville, when he was appointed, there was a lot of backlash about it. Obviously, he did do well initially, and I think that did take the heat off him. But I think when he was initially appointed, there was a lot of questioning about he's actually got into the position because he's a footballer who has played for the men's England national team. He had no managerial experience. There was no actual reason for him to be the manager in the first place. You've also got to look at the other options. Jill Ellis has done amazing stuff for the United States national team. She could be an absolutely perfect candidate. My personal preference would be Emma Hayes. I don't follow much women's football, I do admit. But from what I've seen of Emma Hayes, certainly with how she conducts herself in a media environment, she is absolutely impeccable. She's got a real aura, and that's what I'm looking for. She kind of dominates any conversation she's in, if that makes sense. She, for me, is. I mean, I was watching a talk from Henry Winter, the chief football writer at the Times, and he was saying that he thinks Emma Hayes is going to be the first women's manager to enter the men's game and go and manage a professional.
We cut out. What's going on?
I think Luke's just cut out briefly.
Okay, I'll just take him out for a sec. I'll just take him out for the sec. I'll bring him back in. Don't worry. Before I kind of ask you, Joe, for your thoughts, I did get some thoughts from Jack Butler, who is is probably out of all of us the most qualified to kind of speak about women's football, the one who follows it the most. Sadly, couldn't join us today, but he said Neville was a flawed experiment. The idea was to bring focus to the women's game because they thought he was high profile. Rather than taking them forwards, he took them backwards a lot. The football was awful, and England should replace him with Jill Ellis. So he's made it clear who he'd like to come through instead. Do you think it matters if the FA pick a female manager as opposed to a men's manager, or do you reckon it should just be the best candidate for the job? Which might as well. I mean, I read of the names I read out earlier, 3 of them were women, so maybe that is the best person for the job.
In a competitive sport, it is ultimately a case of picking the best person for the job. It just so happens that the 3 best people for the job, or at least the ones that are being most discussed, are female managers. So I think that makes perfect sense. The one that Luke didn't mention, Casey Stoney of Manchester United, I think she'd be very interesting. Emma Hayes, I've never been quite as well sold. I don't personally like a lot of her punditry, but that prediction that she could actually go into managing the men's game and do very well is interesting, to say the least. If Jill Ellis is available as well, you absolutely need to reach out in that way. As for Phil Neville, it's funny how the level of optimism changed after England won the She Believes Cup a couple of years ago. Everyone seemed to think it was an inspired decision, despite the fact that Phil Neville had 1 experience of management in his life as assistant manager at Valencia and was absolutely useless, arguably even worse than Gary Neville was as the full manager at that club. He didn't really deserve the job. I remember because the previous England women's manager, also male, was dismissed in very suspicious circumstances. And Mo Marley, Mo Marley was supposed to replace him, or at least she was the initial favourite. Again, that's a decision the FA have taken to appoint a male manager. So in light of the fact that this Neville experiment has not worked, the World Cup, I personally thought England would make it to the final, if not win. And you know how often I underrate how good the England teams are. For me, the World Cup was a disappointment for England. I really do believe it was. The USA performance, they really were not that good, great though the USA were. A USA team that ultimately are coming towards the end of their cycle as the best women's team in the world, in my eyes, similar to what Germany were for the men's a few years ago. My next candidate for the women's team, I think Casey Stoney would be very interesting. But if Jill Ellis is available, go for her. She's done it before, and she can do it with this lot of players.
We're going to see if we can bring on Dan Ralph. I'm assuming he's ready now. There he is. Hello.
There he is.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. We'll just get past the bit that you're sort of sideways, but it doesn't. Anyway. Yeah. Do you reckon you've listened to a bit of the discussion just now? Do you reckon Phil Neville deserved to take the team to the Euros, the delayed Euros? Now that we say it, do you reckon he deserved an opportunity to get them to the Euros, or do you reckon it's kind of, with what's going on right now, it was the right time? If the FA wanted to switch to manager, it happened conveniently. This was the time to do so.
I think, if you've taken them through qualification and all that stuff, you perhaps deserve, a chance to actually see the full thing through. But at the same time, if he's not the best candidate for the job, then, football is a ruthless game, and they had to make the best decision for the team.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see who they pick, and I mean, obviously, it's a very surreal time to do job interviews and stuff like that, and really kind of get. And obviously, they'll want people to do presentations and stuff, but it's a very odd time to do that now. But yeah, I mean, if they're going to make a switch, I guess now is the time. Last piece of small news that kind of came up yesterday, kind of broke yesterday, and I'll add Luke to this, so we have 4 people on. The Dutch Football Federation and the Eredivisie made the announcement that they were going to abandon the season. No promotion, no relegation, no champions. I believe Ajax and AZ Alkmaar were joint top, with Ajax leading on goal difference, and there were 9 games to go. What it meant for the second tier was that Cambuur, who were 11 points clear at the top of the table in the second division, they are not going to get promoted. Head coach Henk de Jong, he called it the biggest disgrace in the history of Dutch sport. Obviously, eagle-eyed people may have realized that Alan Pardew manages ADO Den Haag, who are second bottom of the Eredivisie, and now they stay up. So it's quite fortunate for him. Luke, we talked about a little bit about the Belgian league and how it was there different circumstances for them to make that decision of abandoning their season. Now that the Eredivisie has made that decision, I mean, what are your thoughts really? Like, is it because it obviously it comes down to government advice, and the Dutch Prime Minister has made it clear there will be no sports for the next few months. So, is it kind of each country has to kind of just follow their government's advice and just take it from there?
I'm really not sure. So, I mean, I discussed this with Joe earlier on our podcast. So, it makes a little bit more sense in this league than it would do for other leagues, like, for example, with the Premier League, because there's no clear champion-elect. Ajax and AZ Alkmaar are both on 56 points, so they can kind of say, oh yeah, there's no champion for this season. It kind of works out. There's also no side in the league that's really having an exceptional season that could determine their respective future. So if you look at Premier League, you've got the likes of Leicester, Sheffield United and Wolves, all of whom are in contention for European competition, and this season will determine their future for the next few years. Whereas in the Eredivisie, I believe the top four, which are the only ones that really qualify for European competition, are Ajax, AZ Alkmaar, PSV Eindhoven and Feyenoord. So it's the usual suspects. So it's not really going to change things in the long run. I also said to Joe, so I've got a bit of a conspiracy theory as to why they've actually done this and why they've made the decision to end the season now. So I found it interesting that the Dutch league had decided to make this decision now and not in a few months' time. I also find it interesting that the only other league in Europe to end their league early is the Belgian Pro League. There were discussions a few months ago, and these discussions have been going on for years, and they've mostly just been rumours, mostly unsubstantiated, about a potential Beneliga, so merging the Belgian and Dutch leagues to create like one big super league that would potentially challenge the top 5 leagues in Europe. I think that this is something that could come to fruition purely on the basis that we're going to see a lot of Dutch clubs and a lot of Belgian clubs struggling financially as a result of this COVID-19 crisis. So you could see these teams looking to merge into a bigger league that would be more advertisable to big TV companies, easy to sell abroad. And if they manage to start it, let's say in September, or let's say after they've managed to complete the rest of the big 5 seasons, they can actually create a bit of hype around it and televise it in the off seasons of the other leagues. So I think that is something that could potentially happen as a result of the decision that the Eredivisie have made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading through. I mean, Hakim Ziyech, who's on his way to Chelsea, this summer, if the transfer window remains as it is. We have no idea about that yet. He's called it BS that Ajax have been denied the title. It's worth pointing out Ajax they won the title last season and then hadn't won it since 2014, whereas AZ Alkmaar have only won the Eredivisie twice in their history, the last time being 2008, 2009. They were only behind on goal difference, so there's a fair chance that they could have definitely pushed for the league title. Dan, Ralph, do we focus on this decision a lot more because there were 2 teams who had a chance of winning the title that, they were so close to each other? Is that reason why kind of we're looking at this one and going, we're kind of pausing for thought, as opposed to the Belgian league where there was a sizable gap between first and second?
Well, I think you can look at it either way. I think you can look at it in the Belgian league like one of the teams has been robbed. And I think you can look at it in the Dutch league like there was no clear winner, so it in essence made more sense. I think the team that have been robbed, what team was it again? It was 9 points ahead in the second division.
Camboa, I believe.
Yeah, 11 points.
11, there you go. So they're the team who've been most robbed in that scenario. But there are benefits and there are winners and losers as there are in all situations. But I think it was a decision made on the basis of the health of certain people. So I think if you look at it in that light, you can't say it's a bad decision. But then also there's always going to be people who are disappointed. So each league has to look at it individually. Like we've always got to put the health of people in front of what is essentially entertainment. And it's going to be interesting to see going forwards what happens with other European leagues. I don't think there's been mooted a points per game system, which someone suggested. I think UEFA might have suggested that with regards to Champions League and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going ahead. But I think in terms of people's health, I think it's the right decision.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out exactly how do the Champions League qualification placings work. Joe, you might have an idea about it. I'm just trying to have a look to see.
What, in the
if there's a
Eredivisie?
Yeah, does first and second, what's the difference between their qualification?
I mean, don't quote me on this because I have a feeling it changed after they decided. After they gave 4 places to the top 4 leagues, I think the way it works now is the league champions automatically qualify for the group stage. The team that finishes second enters at the 3rd qualifying round, I think, for the Champions League. Obviously, if they don't make it, then they end up in the Europa League group stage. So. Yeah, I mean, if Ajax in the Champions League group stage, hardly surprising. AZ Alkmaar have European appearances over the last few years, so whichever competition they'd have ended up in, not really a surprise. I take what Luke said about the fact that if you're looking at the top 4 of the Eredivisie, you'd probably predict that top 4 in a similar, if not identical order to what there was. What I really don't understand about this is you've got 2 teams in the Eredivisie, the 2nd division, who are clearly ahead, Cambuur and Graafschap. You've got 2 teams in the Eredivisie, Waalwijk and ADO Den Haag, that are clearly behind. I don't see why you can't swap those around, personally. I know it works differently in the Netherlands. There's a complex relegation playoff system between the 2 leagues. But the fact that Alan Pardew has been able to escape relegation in possibly the most Alan Pardew way possible. RKC Waalwijk probably are the weakest team in the league on paper. Them finishing 18th, hardly a surprise. ADO Den Haag are not a bad side. They are not 17th best in the Eredivisie. They're probably a mid-table challenger, maybe even pushing for top 10. Alan Pardew has been maybe the worst manager in all of Europe this year from what of all the managers that I've studied this year. He's done absolutely atrociously. The fact that he has been able to basically get a get-out-of-jail-free card on the back of a global pandemic is just absolutely disgraceful. And for Cambuur and Graafschap, 2 teams that, yes, have been in the Eredivisie in the last 10 years, to not get the places that they so clearly deserve this season, that I just can't forgive. They should have swapped those around.
Yeah, I mean, there were talks of maybe adding the 2 at the top of the 2nd division, Cambuur and the other team, De Graafschap, into making it a 20-team division, but that they've clearly decided not to do that.
Which makes it all the more suspicious, does it not, about the potential Beneliga? Because if they're going to restructure the leagues anyway, then it doesn't matter who gets promoted or relegated.
Yeah, I've just verified. So the top of the league of the Eredivisie was to go to the playoff round. The 2nd place team was to go to the second qualifying round before the playoff round.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, look, the Eredivisie is obviously known for the young Dutch talent it produces year upon year. Obviously, we know Ziyech, this is his final season in the Eredivisie, which is a sad way for it to finish. And, you know, there's been rumours, I think Barcelona are linked with a trio, Myron Boabu being one, Calvin Stengs being another. There's a few players here who, my heart goes out to them because no one wants their final season. If it is their final season, no one wants it to end in this way. And we'll have to see. Of course, there's also the news of the Bundesliga, but we're going to table that till next week and do kind of a special preview. I'll hint towards it at the end of the show, but we'll address it. Don't worry, just not this week, next week. Right, so that's, I guess, really all the major news stories. I don't really think there's a whole lot more than that, other than, you know, I think I read something about Olivier Giroud's getting another 1-year deal, which is great. Okay.
No brainer. Like,
no,
there's no point losing it, particularly if they don't know what's going to go on. Like, they might as well just sign him on for another year.
Yeah.
That's the end of discussion.
There's been I mean, as usual, the transfer window, there are rumours that are going around. Willian linked with Liverpool. Dio Upamecano linked with every top team who needs a centre half, which is pretty much most of them. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. We'll leave news there, and we'll move on to the top 5 bits. So last week, if people remember, we did top 5 wingers. That got some lively discussion about Christian Pulisic, Jared Bowen, and others. I'll take Joe out because I think we'll get everyone to kind of say their list one by one. So Luke, we said this week for those who are just watching, that we were going to do the top 5 managers you would be quarantined with. Now we've left it open for Premier League, outside Premier League, and but the preference was to keep it to managers who are alive. But I feel like I know someone of the 3 of you is going to pick someone who's actually passed away. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna strictly enforce anything. So why don't you kind of lay out your 5 choices of which managers you'd like to be quarantined with?
Quick alteration.
Oh, really? Are you switching someone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I would personally go with. So no particular order. I'd go with Sir Alf Ramsey.
Okay.
Rafael Benitez, Jurgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, and Joe's favourite, and I'm sure he's got him as well, Arrigo Sacchi, who's supposed to be the pioneer of modern football management.
Yeah.
Oh no! I'm going to change one. I'm going to get rid of Alf Ramsey. I'm going to put in Bill Shankly.
Bill Shankly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just writing it down so to put it as a ticker. So we've got Bill Shankly, Rafa Benitez. No surprise there, 3 Liverpool managers. Who else did you have? You had Arrigo Sacchi.
Yeah, the only non-Liverpool ones are Jose Mourinho and Arrigo Sacchi.
And Jose Mourinho, who I read, I think a book's come out about him recently. Apparently he was meant to take over Liverpool.
Manager. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he revolutionised against the Catenaccio or something like that, which is the defensive Italian football, played a more 4-4-2 style.
Yeah,
managed Italy, managed AC Milan, like world-class manager.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll take you out. We'll bring Dan Ralph in, the next person. Have you got your 5, Dan?
I have.
Okay, right.
So I've gone with my number 1. I mean, I know they don't have to be ranked, but Brian Clough, to be in lockdown with. I've also gone with Jose Mourinho. Just box office again. Gone with Sir Alex Ferguson. Just because I'm a United fan, and also I would want to know how he kept on sort of evolving and revolutionising his teams to stay at the top for so long. Then also biased United fan, I've also gone with another manager who's passed away, and that would be Sir Matt Busby. Just because I want to hear about the Munich air crash, how he was able to build the Busby Babes, which went on to win United's first ever Champions European Cup, I suppose it was called back then. And then also my final one, I was torn between Johan Cruyff and Pep Guardiola. I think it'd be interesting to have a dialogue between both of them. Obviously, I've only got one place left, so I'd probably go with Pep Guardiola.
Both of them are from the same school of thought, really.
Same school of thought, yeah, exactly. So, whilst I feel like it would have been a waste to have both of them in this top 5, just because I'd have them both for the same exact reasons, seeing a discussion between the two would be very interesting. But purely because Guardiola's more my era, and he sort of tinkered with Cruyff's thinking when it comes to football, I'd go with Guardiola. And just to see him and Mourinho together would be funny.
Yeah, there we go. That's your 5. A mix of Manchester and a mix of continental as well.
Yeah,
we'll take you out now and bring in Joe for the final list. Have you got Jose Mourinho in your 5 by any chance?
Jose Mourinho is not in my 5, and that's partly because I haven't really so much chosen managers as they were managers, but as human beings that might be useful or funny to me in quarantine. I'll go down the list. Why not? So a lot of people will have picked someone like Brian Clough or Jose Mourinho, someone who has control of his players in the context of a quarantine. I've gone for someone who has absolutely no control whatsoever and would allow me to do whatever the hell I wanted. That's Sven-Göran Eriksson, who we discovered last night has managed basically every team in the world and not very well in most cases. At number 4, I've also gone someone alongside Luke. I've gone for Arrigo Sacchi. Sarci, one of the greatest managers of all time. I was going to put Johan Cruyff in this list, but I don't really feel like reanimating any corpses this afternoon. Sarci's great. He's also got some wonderful quotes that like describe him as a manager, how he came to be a manager, his tactics and whatnot. So I would go for him. Number 3, as a human being, I think this is a fairly basic pick, Jurgen Klopp. I think he's absolutely fascinating, very intelligent, all-around decent human being as well, not to mention fantastic as a manager. At number 2, this is an interesting one. So he's a manager in Serie A, but I haven't gone for him because I like him or because I think he's particularly good. His name is Roberto De Zerbi. He's the current Sassuolo manager. And the reason I've gone for him is because he has absolutely no sartorial standards whatsoever. This is an Italian manager who goes on the road to Rome and Juventus and all these other amazing clubs wearing T-shirts and trainers. That is exactly the kind of quarantine energy I'm looking for. I don't want someone who turns up in a suit and tie for a dinner party. I'm looking for someone who's going to have absolutely no control over my fashion whatsoever, because I'm dressing like crap in this quarantine so far. Roberto De Zerbi at number 2. Number 1, he's been in the Premier League. He's won the Premier League, currently in Serie A, but that's kind of irrelevant. Do it for the memes. Claudio Ranieri. Dilly dong, dilly dong.
I nearly started writing Conte on this ticker because that's what I thought you were going with.
He would snap me in half. Antonio Conte would kill me.
Right. Well, I've got everyone's 5 down there. Let's bring everyone back in. Do you guys want to critique each other's lists, or is it pretty much what you sort of expected from each of you?
It's pretty standard. I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised by Dan's list. I think there's a really good mix of people in there.
Thank you.
I was very tempted to put Ferguson on, but it was the Liverpool allegiance that stopped me. But he's an incredible manager. I'm surprised none of us had Arsene Wenger.
I feel like Arsene Wenger and Jose Mourinho in the same house. One of them.
Yeah, that's true.
And it ain't Mourinho.
Also, with Arsene Wenger, you're going to be finishing up your wine supply very quickly.
Yeah, but that's good though, because you get to sit and drink wine with Arsene Wenger.
Yeah, but who can cook better, Arsene Wenger or Arrigo Sacchi? Come on.
Oh, that's true.
That's another one that changed my decision.
I'm interested by Sacchi because Helenio Herrera was Catenaccio, wasn't he? And then Sacchi came in and sort of revolutionised it. I think Helenio Herrera would have just been more interesting to have because Helenio Herrera was an absolute nut job. I'm fairly sure he was accused of killing someone. Just by
I don't want someone like that in my quarantine house because you can't get out.
No, but just an interesting bloke. I feel like Klopp is he's not beige by any means, but when you've got only 5 managers to pick, I feel like it would be a bit.
I think if you're going to critique any of mine, it would probably be Benitez.
Yeah,
I've gone with Benitez.
I could not cope with him.
I've gone with Benitez because he's a bit weird in that every player who he's worked with doesn't like him really. No player he's ever really worked with has warmed to him. So I'd be interested to see exactly why that is. I'd want to see exactly what it is about Rafa Benitez that makes him so alienating to so many of his players. I don't know if I could put up with that for weeks, but I think it'd be interesting to begin with.
Did anyone think about Maradona?
No.
I wouldn't count him as a manager.
Police would be around in 10 minutes flat.
Your snack supply would be under threat. I'm just going to put that out there.
I mean, your drug supply would be under threat.
That's true, yeah.
I would have thought Sean. I mean, I kind of like the idea of having Sean Dyche around the house to talk to. I reckon he's
just all of the worms in your garden.
Or it would kill me. It's like the opposite of ASMR. That's what
I'm just trying to think of any other managers that come to mind.
Have you done a top 5?
No, in the interests of of balance, I haven't. But if I was to think of a 5 right now, oh goodness, I'll put Dyche in. Why not? I'll put Nigel Pearson in because he'd be great fun to have on watching an Attenborough.
These aren't managers, Josh. These are bouncers.
Picking it I think Pearson with his ostrich knowledge would be great to watch a David Attenborough Planet Earth documentary. I think it'd be really interesting to get takes. I mean Diego Simeone would be a character. He'd just walk around with in his pants, just literally not giving any Fs, just kind of just big cojones.
Who would win the fight, Pearson or Simeone? Because they would fight. If you had them two, they would fight without a shadow of a doubt.
I think Pearson would win that.
Yeah.
Really?
Because I think Simeone got beaten up by David Beckham. Like, I don't think he's got a chance against big old Piercy. Oh, Stuart Pearce has a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Allardyce has been in the not Sam Allardyce. Harry Redknapp's been in the jungle, so he knows what it's like to be away from the wider world with no internet. The
man can't read. He can't even use the internet if you wanted to. He can't read. He can't write. He's illiterate, I'm fairly sure.
I feel like Roy Hodgson's a good curl up for a bedtime story kind of
Definitely
guy.
not.
Boring.
No, I think he's
So
probably the worst manager to be curled up with.
Hello, Josh.
I think he's managed in Sweden, Switzerland. He's got so much wider knowledge.
Managed in the Netherlands. Doesn't mean you want him in your house. Like,
David Moyes managed Sociedad.
Badly, yes.
terribly.
I don't know. Oh, I mean, let me see. I mean, there's some of the like completely wacky ones, like Bertie Votes, I think is his name. He's managed kind of all over the world. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Hodgson being one of the worst ones to have. I would put in the worst list. I'd put Felix Magath in there. I feel like he'd.
Oh God, he'd be doing laps around the garden.
Yeah.
He would be. Didn't he give Hangeland like a certain drink or something? Was that right? I think I read something where he like invented some sort of drink to help people, like help his players or something like that.
I don't know about that, but when he was at Bayern Munich, Owen Hargreaves was saying that he made the players run up and down the stairs of the stadium, which just seems dangerous for a start and a bit strange. So yeah.
Oh, Felix Magath last managed at Shandong Luneng in China. I've just looked up.
For one of the best Bundesliga managers of the last 20 years, his career hasn't exactly gone amazingly. If you're talking about Harry Redknapp, you do realise that if you bring him into your quarantine house, he's going to take Nico Kranjčar and Peter Crouch with him as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He's not good at social distancing, is he?
No.
For that matter, I don't think. There's got to be more managers. There's managers who bring all their favourites, right? They'd be ones that you wouldn't want to go for.
Mourinho would bring Carvalho, Paulo Ferreira as well, Drogba. He'd just bring his whole Chelsea crew. John Terry. I wouldn't want John Terry in my house, but yeah.
I mean, Steve Bruce would probably bring in Isaac Hayden, Andy Carroll. All sorts of players he'd probably bring in, if he's still in a job, that is. Yeah, I mean, an interesting list that, set of lists that you've all kind of got. If I'm looking at a combined five,
I know the worst one would be Maurizio Sarri because of the cigarettes.
No.
Yeah, no, I would not cope.
It'd be fun to have Louis van Gaal. I mean, he'd be very grumpy, but he'd kind of just
Louis van Gaal would be
off.
good,
To be honest, most of the high-profile Italian and Dutch managers would just be intolerable in a quarantine household. Can you imagine living with Carlo Ancelotti?
No, I think he'd be all right, Carlo Ancelotti. I think he's very dignified man. I feel like he'd dress up in a suit every day.
I couldn't handle it.
Thing is, we go back to Van Gaal. Van Gaal had Mourinho and Guardiola in his stint working under him at Barcelona.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
You know, those types of managers which I'd like just so they could share their experiences, because I feel like he's got a lot of good stories to tell, Van Gaal. And then there's managers who, I think Joe's gone with managers who just annoy him the least. Whereas,
Correct.
You know, I think I've gone with managers who I could learn something from.
Yeah, you can see that kind of different perspective in each of your lists. Mourinho and Sarri seem to be the consensus ones. If we had to do a combined five, and then
he was up there,
and Klopp actually, and Klopp. So those are the three that seem to be. At least two of you have those three, and then after that, really, it's up for debate. Really, Yeah, an interesting exercise. I'm just trying to think of any other last minute ones that kind of come to mind, but I think
Ian Holloway. Ian Holloway.
Ian Holloway.
Neil Warnock,
Oh
It's Tim
no.
Sherwood.
Gary
Alan
Megson.
Kirbishley.
Gary Monk. Oh goodness. Okay.
Paolo
Yeah.
Di Canio. To be fair, Paolo Di Canio.
Paolo
would
Di
be very
Canio's box
interesting.
office. I saw him. I went to a Swindon game when he was manager there. He's just, you can just sit and watch him on the touchline. He's so funny. Such a good manager. He's actually better than Maradona because he's actually managed more than Maradona has, and is probably funnier to watch on the touchline. Maradona just
Maradona's
gets
been managing
coked up.
for a long time.
Mind you, Di Canio's like an actual Nazi, so I don't know if I want
Yeah,
him.
I was going to say, why are we even considering Paolo Di Canio?
I'm just saying it'd be interesting, to
He would be
pick
interesting.
his
That's true.
brain. I'd still like to know how he scored that goal. The sort of like volley. Where he
Well,
was
the one
airborne.
against, stunning goal.
For the one for West Ham was like, oh
Yeah.
my god. And I'd like to ask him, because he was manager of Swindon, right? So is it difficult, because he would still have been a lot better than any player that he was managing at Swindon Town. And it's one of those where I'd like to ask him, was it difficult knowing that you were better than all the players that you had at your disposal? Something that Zola's spoken about quite a lot as well.
I don't know if he was at the time, because I think that was around the time that Matt Ritchie was at Swindon. Could be wrong.
I'd take a 60. I'd take a 70.
No, it was
Paolo
his
Di
time.
Canio
Yeah,
over
he
Matt
managed
Ritchie.
Matt Ritchie, who's a decent player. So maybe. Have we lost
But
Josh?
still, in terms of technical
Josh
ability,
seems to have gone missing. I think, as predicted, we've selected lists that are completely different owing to our personalities, which no one could possibly have predicted. We are past 4:30 though. Luke, you've got the next scenario. It's the what if section of the show. We'll change the banners in a few minutes to reflect it. It's where we discuss if a certain scenario had happened or hadn't happened in Premier League history so far, and have a discussion about how the league would have been changed either that season or beyond following it. Luke, you've created this week's, and it's about as Luke Edwards as you could possibly go. Introduce the scenario and why it isn't as funny as the rest of us think it is.
Well, it is funny objectively. If I wasn't a Liverpool fan, this would be hilarious. It's of course Gerrard's slip against Chelsea. Liverpool going into a game at home against Chelsea at Anfield, coming off a 3-2 victory over Norwich and a 3-1 victory over Manchester City in their two previous games. Steven Gerrard at the end of the Manchester City games gets everyone in a team huddle around him. Emotions flying high. It's Hillsborough anniversary, and he goes, "We do not let this slip." We go into the Norwich game. We go 2-0 up. Norwich pull one back, and we get 3-1. Norwich pull another one back at 3-2. We scrape through to the end, 3-3. We then go to the Chelsea game. We only need a draw to maintain control of our title ambitions. Chelsea go into the game having absolutely no ambition to win whatsoever. Mourinho's famously said that he wanted two players to get yellow cards for time wasting in the first half. Martin Atkinson didn't give him them. Whatever. Chelsea, I've never seen so much time wasting in my entire life. Mark Schwarzer taking 30 seconds plus to take a goal kick, things like that. But yeah, it goes into coming up to the end of the first half. It's 0-0. Liverpool aren't really having any trouble whatsoever. Mamadou Sakho makes a simple pass to Steven Gerrard. Gerrard turns to try and see where he can play his pass, and he sees Demba Ba. He panics, he slips, Ba rushes through, slips it past Mignolet. Liverpool 1-0 down. Liverpool go on, lose the game 2-0 after Willian scores late on. Liverpool are currently about to lose the game on goal difference. Lose the title on goal difference. They go into a game against Crystal Palace. They go 3-0 up earlier in the second half rather. At this point, it's made clear by the fact that Raheem Sterling picks up the ball that Liverpool are desperate to go and try and win this game by as many goals as possible, shut down the goal difference of Manchester City and just see what happens. What happens is, Liverpool have had a terrible defence all season. Glenn Johnson is left completely exposed on the right-hand side, and he is a terrible defender, meaning Damien Delaney and Dwight Gale scoring twice. Liverpool concede 3 goals in the final 10 minutes in what is known as Crystanbul, and ultimately lose the title by 2 points. Manchester City winning the remaining 5 games outside of their loss against Liverpool. So the question is, if Gerrard slipped, what happens? Well, first of all, Liverpool probably don't lose against Chelsea, which means that they go to the Palace game, they go 3-0 up. They probably don't try and commit and score as many goals as possible because there's no stake in the goal differential. and then they probably beat Newcastle final day of the season at Anfield, go on to win the title, first one in, at that point, 24 years, I think it would have been. So I think, if personally, based on that season, I think Liverpool, if Gerrard doesn't slip, Liverpool go on and win the title because they draw against Chelsea and they go and win the remaining 3 games after that. Simple as.
I mean, thanks for carrying on, guys. Again, tech issues not been on my side today. But as Luke said, Liverpool drew 3-3 with Palace. City went on to win every other game of the season. And I think they finished second the season after. Liverpool finished 6th, which was that season when Stoke won 6-1 Liverpool finals day of the season. Not a great result for the Reds. But yeah, if Gerrard doesn't slip, then it's fair to say, Joe, that Brendan Rodgers, he would still be managing Liverpool.
No.
There's a chance that might have happened. Do you reckon?
No,
Not?
he definitely wouldn't have survived for this long. I mean, first Premier League title for Liverpool is an impressive accolade by all accounts, but the cracks would have definitely revealed themselves within a few years, and Liverpool would have moved on. Whether or not that would have been to Jurgen Klopp, we don't entirely know. I want to know exactly, because I get the impression you're kind of agreeing with Luke here. I want to know what the thought process is in how the previous game influenced the collapse at Selhurst Park, because yes, Liverpool went 3-0 up and they really desperately needed to win that game by as many goals as possible. But Crystal Palace had sod all to play for in that game. Does the previous result against Chelsea really impact Liverpool's defence that badly when you consider that Liverpool's defence wasn't necessarily the problem against Chelsea?
Watch the highlights, Joe, and you'll see that Martin Skirtle and Glenn Johnson repeatedly left exposed because Liverpool are pushing up, trying to score as many goals as possible. That doesn't happen if they draw against Chelsea because they don't have to score more goals. So do you know what? They sit back, they protect the defence, and they don't concede as many goals as they did.
And that's
straightforward.
And the game plan really was, even when you're 3-0 up, just score as many as possible. I mean, if that's the case, then I completely understand it.
You see it the moment that I think Raheem Sterling got the 3rd goal. He sips through it, and he instead of celebrating, he goes and he picks up the ball and he makes it adamantly clear that we're trying to score as many goals as possible, so that we can try and up the goal differential and put a bit of pressure on Man City.
What I would, the one thing that does happen coming out of this, and it's not necessarily a football thing. I don't know if all of you guys have seen it. I know Luke has in particular. If the Gerrard slip had never occurred, the YouTube channel, If a Liverpool Fan Was a Commentator, would never have become anywhere near as viral as it was, because there were examples of games after that where Liverpool got the absolute you-know-what taken out of them by that channel. But it really started in those 2 successive match days. The fact that it was one directly after the other made that probably one of the biggest viral sporting trends of that year, dare I say. That would not have happened without the Gerrard slip.
Dan, any thoughts?
I think it's out of the question. I think they would have won the league. I think Brendan Rodgers would have lasted longer than he did, just off the back of being the first manager in Liverpool's history to win the Premier League. Due to that, I don't think they would have got Klopp. And due to that, I think they'd be in a worse position than they are in now. Someone else would have got Jurgen Klopp. I'm not going to speculate as to who. Man United, perhaps, I don't know. But I think if you take away, the slip and take away how iconic of a moment it has become, then you could argue, take all that away and just look at it objectively. Liverpool are probably better off for the slip having occurred than they would be if the slip hadn't occurred, because they would have lasted with Brendan Rodgers for a lot longer. They wouldn't have got Klopp, and they wouldn't be about to win, a league title, albeit with an asterisk, next to it due to coronavirus. But yeah, it's been funny for the memes, but if it hadn't occurred, I actually think they wouldn't be where they are now. So yeah.
If I could just jump in quickly on that. I mean, there's definitely a case to say that Liverpool, in terms of the Klopp thing, definitely benefited as a result of this. What I'd also say about this first title is what makes this season so special for Liverpool fans is that Liverpool have been, from day one, so far ahead of every other team in the Premier League in almost every aspect that it's almost ridiculous. It's been an almost perfect season, not just in points, but in performances in terms of how they've pulled it across. This was not the case this season. This was a Liverpool team that were brought over the line in terms of hypothetically winning the title by maybe one of the best individual seasons in Premier League history from Luis Suarez. On the other end of the field, they had John Flanagan playing at left back. This was not a good Liverpool defence by any means. So, and the thing is, like, yes, you can account for 5 goals being conceded in these games, the 2 against Chelsea, the 3 against Palace. Even without those goals on the board, Liverpool's goal difference is significantly behind Manchester City's winning the league. There's an 8-goal differential there. So would they have been deserving champions if the slip wouldn't have happened? Maybe, but certainly not to the extent that they would have been this year, COVID-19 pending.
Yeah, another player who was on that team and then decided to join Manchester City was Raheem Sterling. Now, we know mainly that was more for off-field in terms of like contract stuff and paid negotiations and whatever. Do you reckon that if he'd won the title at Liverpool, that would have changed anything, or do you reckon it would have been he'd have moved to Man City regardless?
I think he would have joined them because the issue that Liverpool had was what they did with the Suarez money more than anything, bringing in the likes of Lazar Markovic and Ricky Lambert. I won't say Adam Lallana. I think he's been a very good player. Dejan Lovren, to an extent, he's kind of redeemed himself, but was not worth the money that we paid for him at the time. I think I think Sterling would have left anyway, because I think Suarez leaves regardless. I think he wanted that move to Spain. He sabotages his career with Bayern Killing deliberately to get the move to Spain. I don't deny that happens anyway. I do think Liverpool misspend the money. I think Liverpool would have been better off. I think they would have had just as bad of a season than the season after. I think there's, maybe not necessarily the 6-1 at Stoke, but I think the issues that they were having were always going to happen that season. I think the only thing really would change is that they would have been more patient with Rodgers in the 15-16 season, which, as Dan's mentioned, means that they probably don't get Jurgen Klopp. He probably would have gone to someone like Manchester United. It's an interesting one. I'm kind of hesitant to say that actually we are probably better off that it did happen, but it was still such like a gut-wrenching experience for those 2 games with the Gerrard slip and then the Palace Christian Ball situation. Not a good few days.
And a lot of the players on that team have departed the club. I think Jordan Henderson's one of the few who remain. Henderson,
he's the only one.
Yeah. So, it's a tough one because you, in the moment, obviously you want it, but the way things have panned out, I don't know if Liverpool fans would completely trade it all back. But you mentioned Klopp. Maybe, I mean, if he might have ended up at Man United. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. And I imagine Dan would have a lot to say about this, but Klopp would certainly work his magic.
During October 2015.
Yeah.
So Van Gaal left United. Well, he got sacked or left in like July 2016. So if Liverpool held on to Rodgers till the end of the 15-16 season, then Van Gaal and Rodgers were left at the same time. And then you wonder what would Klopp have done if he'd had the choice between Liverpool and Man United.
I actually think Klopp chooses Liverpool.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah,
but there would have been very different situations. I think the amount of money the Manchester United would have been able to throw at him.
But at the same time, I think United would have chosen Mourinho regardless. Actually, I think it would have been the wrong choice, but I think United would have still chosen Mourinho. And Mourinho definitely would have chosen United over Liverpool. I don't think Liverpool would have ever gone for him, but if he had the choice, Mourinho would have always chosen United.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when another thing you brought up was would Liverpool have improved or not? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the famous transfer committee, the pieces were, I mean, Michael Edwards was at the club at the time, working with Rodgers. Obviously, there were signings made. I think Firmino was one example of a signing that Edwards pushed for more than Rodgers did, I think.
Rodgers played him wing back in one game because he didn't know how to use him.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see how, if Rodgers had been granted a year more of
How
a
long do you
year
think
longer.
he lasts? How long do you think Rodgers lasts?
I think Rodgers gets to the end of 15-16 season. If he wins the league, I think he gets until the end
And
of
where do you
15-16
think they
season.
finish? Roughly.
Wait, say again?
Where do you think they finish? Where do you think they end up in the
Liverpool don't reach the Europa League final for one. They don't reach the League Cup final. I mean, Liverpool had 2 cup finals in Jurgen Klopp's first season, which was part of a bigger achievement. They finished 8th in the league anyway. I think they probably finished in the same position.
Right.
Actually, saying that, I think they might have finished a little bit higher because they wouldn't have had Europa League and other things to concentrate on. Because I remember at the end of the 15-16 season, Klopp was just throwing out reserve players left, right, and centre because he just was focusing on Europa League. So maybe they finished a little bit higher, but yeah, nowhere near as good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the 15-16 season, which was the Leicester season, which was the one afterwards, and Liverpool finished 8th, which was the year. I mean, that was Rodgers' final few months. So that would be a very interesting what if regarding the Leicester season. But yeah, it's gosh, you want as many Premier League titles as you can, but like I said before, it might have just worked out for the best. And who knows? I mean, United, obviously, as Dan said, they do just stick to their guns and go with the path that they eventually did. And yeah, do you reckon Tottenham? I'm trying to think of where Tottenham were timeline wise, but surely a project like that might have appealed to Klopp, maybe.
No,
I'm not saying
Tottenham were Pochettino at that time. That was when they finished 3rd in the 2-horse race, which is the most Tottenham thing of all time.
Ends up at Liverpool regardless. Some point in his career, I don't know what point that would be, but I think Klopp always had an affinity for Liverpool. I don't know why, but he always seemed. I remember there was one video
political
pitching the "You Never Walk Alone" badge. So the Liverpool badge, which has "You Never Walk Alone" under it, I think, in the tunnel. There's one of him touching that as a Borussia Dortmund manager. So I think Klopp ends up at Liverpool regardless. I just think it takes a bit longer.
And you'd imagine
I
was
was
going to say Arsenal would have probably tried to attract him as well. I'm trying to think of, maybe some people who are watching the stream may not know, but obviously the Sven Mislintat works with Klopp at Dortmund.
Yeah.
Was the head of recruitment, now no longer is, but maybe that appointment may have swayed him. I have no idea. We're obviously playing with a lot of hypotheticals, but maybe that's something he looks at. I have no idea. But I
do agree with the idea that Klopp was always going to join Liverpool.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think it's not even in footballing terms. If you ever hear Jurgen Klopp talk about politics and the spirit of society, it tallies so well with what you associate Liverpool Football Club with. He was always going to end up at that club one way or another.
He's very Bill Shankly. He's pretty much the exact same mould of sort of man motivator socialist that Shankly was. So yeah, definitely subscribes to that at that end of the club. I think as well, Liverpool and Dortmund are somewhat similar clubs. They kind of portrayed as being the plucky underdog, even though that's not necessarily true, particularly nowadays. But I think in terms of the atmosphere of the two clubs, it's something that Klopp works well with. Got big famous stands, yellow wall, and the Kop and things like that. So structurally, it was always going to make sense that Klopp came to Liverpool.
Tell you what, though, I'd have loved to see Klopp at a team like Napoli in Italy. I feel like Napoli's that equivalent, a very passionate home support.
Yeah, the underdog again, kind of thing.
Apart from the fact that Klopp has done, very well at sort of detriment of Man United and other teams, I think that Klopp was so perfect for Liverpool in a sense that he refound their identity for them, which they'd lost, I'd say, a bit with Luis Suarez and the racism scandal under Kenny Dalglish. I think they were starting to they were always a team of the people, I'd say, very, very Labour. And they sort of lost it with Luis Suarez, and then they just lost their complete identity. And it was brought back in a way under Brendan Rodgers. The slip happens, Brendan Rodgers goes, and then they get Jurgen Klopp. And Jurgen Klopp just brings everything that people love about Liverpool, but also hate. I hate Liverpool. But Jurgen Klopp, like Luke was saying, is so perfect for Liverpool that he ends up there regardless of, slip, I think.
Interesting that the 2013-14 Serie A season, you had Allegri sacked by AC Milan. You had Mazzarri resigning at Napoli and then ending up at Inter. So there was a host of... I don't know if Klopp would have been interested in going to Italy. but
Well,
there
wait,
was
13,
definitely-
wait, 13,
A couple-
14.
yeah.
I don't see
Nah,
that.
not a chance. He was still at Dortmund.
I
Yeah.
mean, sorry, 14, 15 rather.
Napoli's not a step up, I don't
He was
think,
still at
from
Dortmund 14, 15 as well. 15. He left Dortmund at the end of
15,
14, 15. Yeah.
Right.
You've also got to
Hang on.
consider that around that period, like even if it was a top four finishing side in Serie A, it was not an upgrade on Borussia Dortmund.
No, I agree.
It would
I
not
agree.
be an upgrade on any team in the top 6 in the Prem. Like it would be a lateral move at best. So now maybe today that's a different case, but honestly, Jurgen Klopp fits. I mean, you mentioned Napoli, Josh. That's one I'd never really considered before. Incidentally, similar to Liverpool, a team that rely on very important Rafa Benitez in their history of rebuilding. But even that does not fit anywhere near as well as what he's done with Liverpool Football
What were
Club.
Bayern Munich doing at the time? Who did they have?
Oh.
Pep, didn't they?
Let's have a look.
Yeah.
No,
Pep,
didn't Pep? Wasn't Pep already up? Didn't Pep and Klopp
Pep was
join roughly the same
14.
time?
Pep
14,
was,
15 was Pep.
Yeah, I think
15,
he joined
16.
City 16, 17. So it'd be 14 to 2016 was Pep.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe
Let's
they
say-
would have eyed him up.
I-
Maybe.
I mean, I do see Klopp to Bayern Munich as something that could have happened if he'd waited till the end of the Pep Guardiola regime. That would have just been natural in terms of everything that Dortmund do, which is good, ends up at Bayern Munich and isn't as good when it gets there, apart from Lewandowski.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at and see. I don't want to say he was under pressure necessarily, but I do want to look at Joachim Löw and see maybe. I mean, the German Federation would have loved it if Klopp became German coach.
Klopp
But obviously,
doesn't
they.
suit national teams. He
No,
needs
he
a
does
culture
not.
to build.
agree.
I mean, I'm thinking that they would have. Obviously, they would have loved to have him from their point of view.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, maybe it was fate. I think we should just. I think we'll call it there, guys. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the show. Thanks to Joe, Luke, Dan for coming on now, and obviously we had Joe on earlier with Jack, Ed, and Connor, the NFL stuff. Next week we'll be back with a special edition of RAW Sport Quaran-Stream. It won't be the same format because we will have a special guest to interview, and it will be explained if you follow our social medias, which is in the video description. And if you're a Warwick student and you want to know and you want to kind of get involved and see what's going to happen next week, join the RAW Sport 2019-20 Facebook group. All will be revealed. I'm trying to tease it as much as I can. But yeah, that's it from us, and I will see you next week.